Hi there. I am Gwen Raimundi. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist associate here in the state of Washington, and I specialize in grief and trauma. This video is the fourth in a four-part series on trauma. The first video, or the first part of this series, was about describing um, the different parts of the different kinds of trauma. In the second part, I talked about the physiological impacts of trauma. And then in the last one, I talked about the emotional and psychological impacts of trauma. And then there's essays that go with this and so on and so forth. And you'll see the link to the essay down below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you are seeing this on my blog or in my newsletter, you've already read the essay. Unless you just skip down to the bottom to get to the link. Anyways, today I wanted to talk about the essay talks about processing versus healing trauma, and a little bit about why I don't use the word healing and instead use the word processing when we talk about doing our trauma work. And I wanted to talk in the video a little bit about the trauma-informed embodiment approach that I utilize, and kind of the steps of it, which also describes the trauma-informed embodiment level 1 group program that I'm offering. These first phases are the things that we do in that group. And I do this work with individual clients also. So in all trauma work, we should be beginning with what's called stabilization, the stabilization and safeness phase. It is the phase where in theory, the therapist helps the client bring down the nervous system, helps them find a sense of calm, a sense of emotional regulation, so that they can do some self-soothing, some self-calming, um, uh, and also begin to develop a sense of safeness, not safety, but safeness um, in within themselves and within their surroundings, and then within relationship with the therapist, which then hopefully can be extended out into your relationships outside of the therapeutic container. The way I do this, first of all, not all therapists do that, do this stabilization work, which I think is really vital. I have great concerns about not doing the stabilization work and folks diving deep into trauma work and basically having psychotic mental breakdowns, because it's too overwhelming, it's too much, the triggers become too intense and they have no tools to calm themselves. So the first half of my approach is always, always, always doing that stabilization work, and helping the client really connect with. We've got a new kitten recently. Sorry, helping the client really connect with themselves and begin to listen to their bodies and have that visceral self-awareness as opposed to just the psychological self-awareness. And the way I do that, the way I approach that is in four steps. Nervous system regulation is number one. Physical boundaries is number two. Centering and grounding is number three. And then acknowledging and embracing our inner and outer resources is four. So it's called resourcing. The nervous system work, I believe, is an absolute baseline where we have to start. We have to know how to bring our sympathetic nervous system down out of this highly hyper or hypo activated state where we are dissociated from our bodies. We need to be able to come back in, to calm our systems down, to have those very what are really very basic tools. And unfortunately, in our culture, things that we never learn growing up. We create our own ways of self-soothing that are incredibly helpful when we're young, that are our lifelines, that guaranteed our actual survival. And as we become adults, those tools don't really work so great for us. Um, and so these other tools do, these really simple exercises. All of the nervous system exercises I offer are straightforward. Most of them, the majority of them, you can do in like 30 seconds or less. Um, some of them take a bit longer, but and there's a few that take kind of a long time, but most of them are like super, super quick things. There's things like what's called lip tap, and taking your index finger and just tapping your lips. And what this does is it initiates, it activates your saliva glands and produces saliva in your mouth. Now, what that saliva in your mouth tells your body is that you are actually okay. Because when you're in fight, flight, or freeze, you're nervous, your part of that reaction is that your mouth goes dry. Because what is happening is when you're in fight, flight, freeze, you are taking your digestive system offline. You can't be digesting food if you're running or fighting for your life, or freezing for your life for that matter. And so when we activate those saliva glands, then we're telling our system, hey, no, we're all right. We're all right. We don't have to, be freaked out here. We're okay. And it helps bring that sympathetic nervous system down and bring the parasympathetic nervous system up online, which is our rest, digest, and sex system, right? So all of my nervous system exercises are, not all of them, but most of them are this simple, like truly. Some of them take a little longer. Some of them are body scans. Some of them are breath work. But many of them are just this simple thing, a simple thing like this. Once you feel like you've got your nervous system in a relatively okay state, like, okay, I've got these tools, I feel comfortable with them. I can notice that my anxiety is starting to come down a little bit. I can notice that I'm not reacting quite as quickly. And it may be just a really small difference that you're noticing, but it's a difference, right? Once you're in that place, then we move on to, this is an individual work. In the Thai program, we spend a month on nervous system, which is usually about how long I spend with clients. Usually it's a month to 6 weeks. Then we move into physical boundary work. Now, this is very different from emotion, the emotional, psychological boundaries that many people work with clients on, and it's great work and important work. However, it's half of the work, in my opinion. The other half is the physical boundary piece and the being in your body and the knowing where you end, where another begins, and having that very visceral understanding of this is me and this is mine and this is my space, right? And that is you and that is yours and that is your space, right? Our physical boundaries are connected to our emotional and psychological boundaries. They just are, because of our sensory receptors and how we are aware of our surroundings or not aware of our surroundings. In that boundary work, we are also doing a very real body reclaiming. Most of us growing up, whether there was abuse or neglect or not, most of us growing up in the Western world were not raised in an environment where we had bodily autonomy, where we were considered our own person, right? And so this reclaiming of the body is really revolutionary and can feel incredibly strange uh, because it's not something we are raised to do. And it's really vital. It's really vital in our boundary work, in our emotional and psychological boundary work, as well as obviously our physical boundary work. Once that work feels comfortable enough, or for a month, if you're in the Thai, a month or 5 weeks, I don't remember if it's 4 or 5 weeks, if you're in the Thai program, then we move into what's called centering and grounding. And so that is that, it's also called presencing orienting, centering, grounding, presencing, orienting. I think those are the 4 different words that we in the trauma and psychological community use, therapy community. And it is that having that sense of being able to feel ground, being able to know where our own center of gravity is, being able to feel our connection from our center of gravity down to ground, to be able to be present in the moment, to be able to notice what is going on around us without a hypervigilance, right? But allowing our sensory receptors to do their work and us listening to those receptors and reacting appropriately. After that, we move into resourcing, which is as simple as it sounds, which is really acknowledging our own inner resources, as well as the resources we have out in the world, our family, our friends, the people we can trust, the people we can count on, doctors, therapists, like all of those people, right? Those resources. Inner resources are resilience, compassion. I also include things that are skill based, like um, being able to fix a clogged drain, right? Now, you may think, well, what does that have to do with trauma? Being able to fix a clogged drain, like that has really not much. And well, yes, on the surface, it doesn't have much. Also, being able to acknowledge that we have skills, that we have talents, that we are able to function and do things in the world is a very important part of our trauma work, because trauma will tell us very differently, right? And so if we're able to acknowledge all these different things that we are capable of and do, and the things, especially the things we do well, that helps with that unraveling of that trauma programming that we have received. That is the first phase of the trauma-informed embodiment approach. And those are the things that we explore in the 6-month trauma-informed embodiment level 1 program that I offer. Also in the online program, there's a lot of psychoeducation on trauma itself, on the nervous system, on attachment theory, on our hierarchy of needs, our human needs. So there's a lot of other information that goes into that program. So that is that. Different therapists, different modalities have different ways of approaching this safeness and stabilization piece. I don't think there's any one right way. I don't think there's any one wrong way. I believe they all are helpful for folks, and some are more helpful for some folks than for others, right? We all need to find what works for us. The trauma-informed embodiment approach may not work for everyone, and that's okay, because we're all individuals and that's how it works, right? And also, I've found it to be incredibly helpful for many people, as well as myself. I live this stuff, right? So if you're interested in either working with me individually or in the TIE program that begins on August 1. There are links below here. If you're on YouTube, there's also links below if you're reading this either in the newsletter or the other place, my blog. Okay, all right. Thank you. This is the last video in this series. I hope that it was helpful for you, and I look forward to connecting with you. Okay.